Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our podcast called History Today, wherein we discuss relevant topics about our history together with historians to show their professional and reliable perspective per episode. I am your host, Lyka Mae Dayag, together with my co-host.
Hi everyone, I am Villaluz and we are back for another podcast session. So, how was everyone been ba? I hope you guys are staying hydrated ha? Ikaw naman, Lyka, kumusta ka?
Yeah, I'm okay, Franz. I'm glad you asked. Hope you guys are mentally and physically stable today. Anyway, this month is a special month, especially to the women all over the world. Kaya naman, this episode is dedicated to every woman out there. Right, friends?
Totally agree with you, Lyka. Dedicated ito for Women's Month this March. So, why don't we just reveal our topic for today, right?
And there you have it, viewers and listeners. Looking back at the struggle of a comfort woman to help us with our prompt discussion,
let us all give a warm welcome to our two special historians, Miss Cristine Vivas and Miss Era Soriano.
Hello, thank you for including me again in today's episode. Grabe, I'm always excited to share my thoughts here dahil magandang pag-usapan ang nakaraan.
I agree with you, Miss Era. Masaya kayang pag-usapan ng past, di ba? There's so much to learn from our history kaya. Okay, ang dami kong input. So, how about you, Miss Cristine?
Same here. I enjoyed listening to your podcast series and I really appreciate you guys for inviting me here.
Oh, it's always our pleasure to have you here po.
So, today's episode is dedicated for Women's Month, and we will especially discuss the struggles of a comfort woman during World War II.
That's right, Lyka. This topic is kind of sensitive talaga, so we must take note that it might be triggering for some of our listeners.
Right, that is why we put a trigger warning before we started the discussion.
Also, para naman sa ating mga new listeners dyan, let me just say that our goal to every podcast show that is to correlate history to contemporary issues, di ba, Lyka?
Agree. So, to start off, we have our frequent visitor, historian, Ms. Soriano, who will first explain how the comfort women started.
Right, ayun nga yung tanong ko, Lyka eh. Paano nga ba nag-start ang comfort women system?
Okay, so we need to keep in mind na yung comfort women system, according to Yuri Tanaka in their book entitled Comfort Women, A Filipino Story of Prostitution and Slavery Under the Japanese Military, was established between March 1932 in Shanghai and 1945. During the World War II, isa itong system of sexual slavery na pinamumunuan ng mga Japanese imperial government sa mga colonized countries like Korea, China, and the Philippines, to name a few. Sa mga countries na ito, numerous comfort stations were established for the military.
Oh, I see. Pero, di ba, Miss Era, they're in the middle of the war? Hindi ba dapat, focus lang sila sa labanan? Why did they started that kind of system po ba? And what is its purpose?
Originally kasi, military battles were common sa Japanese military. Pero mas naging rampant ito nung nangyari ang tinatawag na Nanjing Massacre. December 30, 1937, during an attempt of taking over China, nag-start ang Japanese Imperial Army na magsagawa ng 6-week-long massacre kung saan naging dahilan ng pagbagsak ng Chinese city of Nanjing. Bukod doon, tumatak ang mga pangyayaring ito sa buong mundo dahil sa pangre-rape ng Japanese troops sa mga Chinese women between 20,000 and 80,000 na bilang.
Shucks! Ang lala pala talaga.
Grabe, no? Ang dami nun. So, they started the so-called comfort women system para maiwasan yung pangre-rape ng mga Japanese. Tama po ba?
Yes, tama ka din, Franz. Nakita kasi ni General Okamura na maaaring magkaproblema kung magpapatuloy ang mga nangyayari. Kung kaya naglabas siya ng mga utos kung saan pinapalawak pa niya ang tinatawag nilang comfort stations o ang military brothels para naman daw mabawasan ang mga cases ng rape at sexually transmitted disease. Hindi lang yan ang mga rason dahil according din kay Yuri Tanaka, ang Japanese military leaders started this system upang mag-ratify ang desires ng mga Japanese soldiers at maiwasan daw ang kanilang stress sa gitna ng gyera at para na rin masiguro na walang mga espiya galing sa kalaban nila.
Kung ang rason nito ay maiwasan pa yung mga pangyayari, gaya nung sa Nanjing, bakit parang mas lumala lamang ito? Naging talamak din ang panghuli ng mga sundalo sa mga kababaihan at patuloy na tumataas ang bilang ng mga pangyayaring ito.
I agree with you, Lyka. Hindi po ba parang ang nonsense ng mga major reasons kung bakit nila sinimulan ang sistemang ito?
Yes, totoo yan. There has been numerous reports na dahil sa paglaki ng mga brothels, yung supposed na recruitment of women resulted in kidnapping or coercing them. This means na hindi naman talaga na-lessen ang cases ng rape. Women were treated inhumanly, forced to have sex by their captors, and some in the most brutal ways. So instead of preventing the situation, kagaya nga ng sabi mo, Lyka, mas lumala pa dahil mas na-encourage ng Japanese Empire ang panghaharap sa mga qualified na kababaihan to be a comfort woman.
Grabe, umpisa pa lang ng discussion natin, ang heavy na agad. Right, Lyka?
Agree, friends! Pero, before po tayo mag-continue, sino ba muna ang ating main character for today's episode?
Right, oo nga pala. Ang ating main character or female lead for this episode would be Maria Rosa Henson. Pero di ba, Lyka, sino nga ba si Maria Rosa? For sure, kaunti pa lang ang nakakakilala sa ating protagonist. So I think we should do a background check muna, right?
Yes, tama ka dyan, friends.
So, sino nga ba si Maria Rosa Henson? Well, si Maria Rosa Henson, let's start from the beginning. On the 5th day of December 1927, si Maria Rosa Henson was born. Her father, Don Pepe, owned a rice plantation in Angeles, Pampanga, meaning siya ay rich landlord. Also, this is where he met Julia, Rosa's mother.
Add ko lang din, just a background on her parents, Don Pepe had his own family before Rosa came to existence. So, in essence, this detail implies that si Maria Rosa is an illegitimate child, or what we say as anak sa labas. According to Maria Rosa Henson herself in their book entitled Comfort Woman, A Filipino Story of Prostitution and Slavery Under the Japanese Military, Julia worked as a maid for Don Pepe's family. But tragic events happened during her stay. Ni-rape ni Don Pepe si Julia. Take note, hindi lang isang beses ito nangyari. Along with the multiple rape incidents, na-realize si Don Pepe at nag-confess siya sa pamilya ni Julia that he fell in love with her. Also, sinabi niya na willing din siya to support their family's needs as long as din sila ni Julia.
Oh, ganun po pala. So, dahil po ba sa pang-rape ni Don Pepe kay Julia, doon na nabuo si Maria Rosa?
Yes, that's right, Franz. Partida, according to Rosa. Religious person pa yan si Don Pepe, ah.
Ay, shucks. Grabe naman po pala.
Now, going back to Rosa, she attended school at St. Mary's Academy when she was 7 years old. Ang kanyang pag-aaral pati lahat ng pangangailangan ng kanyang pamilya ay suportado ni Don Pepe. That's why according to Rosa herself, her needs for school were always insufficient. Nevertheless, she still did well in her education. According to her, he was very skilled in handicrafts, particularly in embroidering and knitting. And her talents for these crafts earned her some money to buy her necessities.
Wow! Very talented and excellent naman po pala si Rosa, no?
Yes, tama. But although her skills were excellent, her ultimate dream was to be a doctor.
By the way, just for additional info, the name Maria Rosa was given by Don Pepe, her father. Kasi yung time na yon, the name Maria was a popular name in their generation for Catholic girls like Rosa. Whereas the name Rosa naman was inspired by her birthday. During the first Monday of December kasi, people celebrate Mother's Day wherein roses were pinned on either side of their chest to indicate if their mother is still living or not. A red rose would be pinned on the left side of the chest if their mom is alive. White rose naman would be pinned on the right side of the chest if yung nanay is patay na.
Oh, ganun po pala. Ayan. Thank you to our historians for a quick yet insightful background check. Grabe, wala pa tayo sa kalahati ng show. I learned so much na agad.
True. Alam mo ba, while they were explaining what happened, naisip ko lang na, red flag na rin pala ang mga tao noon.
Ay nako, sinabi mo pa, Lyka. Feel ko nga kung ngayon nangyari ang mga pangyayari noon, canceled na sila. Lalo na siguro si Don Pepe.
Oo nga eh. Pero alam mo, at the end of the day, it it is very serious. All we can do is to look back at things talaga and learn from it and just do better.
Yes. Speaking of looking back, how about we look back din sa situation ng Philippines noong panahon ni Rosa? I think that was the time na nagkaroon ng World War II. Am I right, Miss Vivas?
That is right, Fran. World War II occurred from 1939 to 1945. Within those years, the Japanese occupation took place in the Philippines. Alam niyo ba that on December 7 of 1941, Japan made a surprise attack on the US naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Sabi nga that this surprise attack was supposed to be a preventive act against USA to stop them from interfering with Japan's goal to control Southeast Asia. Although the goal was for the US Army to retreat, the bombing of Pearl Harbor ay nag-lead sa USA to join the Second World War and declare war against Japan.
Wait, Miss Cristine. Kung USA ang nag-declare ng war against Japan, bakit nagkaroon pa ng Japanese occupation sa Pilipinas? Di ba, Japan at Amerika lang ang magkaaway?
Yan ay dahil sa naging goal ng Japan na magkaroon ng kontrol sa Southeast Asia. 10 hours after the bombing of the Pearl Harbor, December 8, the Japanese occupation started in the Philippines. Since the Philippines was a territory of USA, Japan needed to clear the American troops in the country for them to achieve their objective.
And then, dito kilala si General Douglas MacArthur, the commander of the US Army Forces in the Far East, short for USAF. Siya yung nag-lead sa mga American troops that time. General MacArthur was assigned to the Japanese occupation mission. Ang purpose ng mission niya was to disarm the Japanese forces and give punishment to them. Also, noong December 26, 1941, for the leniency of the metropolitan area, General Douglas MacArthur declared Manila an open city without any hint of military forces and objectives in that area.
So ano pong nangyari after that?
Ayun na nga. So, following this declaration, the Japanese came from i-occupy para ang Manila on January 2 of 1942. However, dahil sa massive power ng Japan, si General Douglas MacArthur and his family were compelled to escape the country and relocated to Australia on March 11, 1942. Take note na yung isang escape na to was under the orders of the President Franklin Roosevelt.
Hala, if umalis pala ang leading commander, paano ng mga Pilipino noon? Ano yun? Did MacArthur abandon his troops?
In a way, oo. The Filipinos ended up fighting alone. On March 29, 1942, a Filipino guerrilla movement organization was formed to revolutionize the country against the Japanese occupation. This Filipino revolutionary group was named as the Hukbalahap, or the Hukbong Bayan Laban sa Hapon.
Oh, ano ko ngayon, Lyka? What did you expect ba sa mga Pilipino? Matapang tayo eh. Usong-uso na nga sa panahon ngayon ang makipagbardagulan sa kahit kanino sa social media. Noong unang panahon pa kaya?
Ito naman, worried lang naman kasi. Siyempre, we became so dependent sa military forces ng USA since allies tayo, di ba? Pero true, matapang talaga tayo. Kaya I agree with your point.
Tama.
Pero ito ha, even though Filipino and American military forces become allies against the Japanese troops, their military enforcements were not enough, and so the U.S. Army Major General Edward P. King still surrendered to Japanese General Lieutenant Masaharu Homa on April 9, 1942. Sa araw na yon, the fall of Bataan occurred, and the Death March commenced. The Death March comprised of Filipino and American soldiers who were walking from Mariveles, Bataan to San Fernando, Pampanga. The walk ended on April 17, 1942.
Wait, Miss Cristine, question lang po. What happens po ba if a soldier collapse or like tumigil sila saglit para maghabol ng hininga, ganun po?
Nakakalungkot man siya tanggapin, pero oo, it was either they died due to starvation or shot to death. When they collapsed, and during the death march, approximately 10,000 people died along the way.
Yikes, that was so disheartening and enraging naman po pala, no?
Oo nga. Pero, anong nangyari kay MacArthur? Hindi ba siya nagsabi ng, I shall return? Paano natapos ang Japanese occupation? Nagkaroon ba ng comeback ang general?
Yes, Lyka. On the 28th day of October 1944, General Douglas MacArthur returned to the Philippines by landing on the island of Leyte. Here, he said his line, "I have returned."
So by January 1945, MacArthur's troop invaded Luzon, and by July 5 of the same year, he announced that the country has now been liberated from the hands of the oppressive Japanese.
Hindi ba September 2 nag-surrender ang mga Hapon?
Ayan ang common knowledge, pero on August 15 of 1945 talaga yon when the Japanese announced their surrender and while aboard on the USS Missouri on September 2. Same year, they officially and formally signed their surrender. This defeat of the Japanese colony was also overseen by the American General Douglas MacArthur.
Oh, okay. I see. Ayan. July 5 was the liberation, and then September 2 was the official fall of the Japanese Imperial Army.
Para naman sa ating mga listeners dyan, make sure to take note of this to clear misconceptions and iwas na rin sa fake news.
Tama. Anyhow, now that we know na the highlights of what happened during the great history of the Japanese occupation, maybe it's time to go back to the story of our beloved protagonist. What do you think?
I certainly agree with you, Lyka. So, the real question that we should be asking now is, what really happened to Maria Rosa? At bakit natin siya pinag-uusapan ngayon?
Since nabanggit naman na kung sino si Maria Rosa, we'll then expand kung ano nga ba ang connection niya sa pagiging comfort woman.
So, Rosa is a part of the Hukbalahap of Hukbong Bayan laban sa Hapon guerrilla, and she is one of the victims of the Japanese comfort women system.
Oh, so Miss Era, paano po ba nangyari yun? Parted po ba siya ng hook? Paano naman po siya napunta sa kamay ng mga Hapon kung ganun?
Tama. 15 anyos pa lang siya ay miyembro na siya ng hook. In April 1943, she was tasked to collect sacks of dried corn. Ang hindi niya alam ay nakapaloob pala roon ay mga baril at bala. Kung kaya't noong paraan na sila sa isang checkpoint sa May Angeles, ay pinag-ingat siya ng kanyang mga kasama.
So doon, nahuli silang nagdadala ng mga armas?
Hindi, dahil walang napansin ang mga Hapon na sundalo sa mga dala nila. Kaya pinaraanan nila itong mga to. Ngunit, nung palayo na sila, pinabalik at iniwan nila si Rosa at siya ang dinala sa lumang ospital ng Angeles. Doon ay may kasama pa siyang 6 na babae.
Pero ibig sabihin, ginawa nilang brothel ang lumang ospital?
Tama. At that time kasi, parang may mga naka-assign o bilang ng mga comfort women sa lugar na yon. Doon, they were only given little food, a cup of tea, rice, and dried fish on the first day. Pero mostly, on daily basis, they were only given rice, salty black beans, and preserved radish. On special occasions naman, chicken, hard-boiled egg, and fried chicken. In that place, she was violated thousands of times. 15 years old pa lang siya, and when she first got there, she was raped by 12 soldiers. Then 12 more after only giving a half an hour rest. Every day from 2 in the afternoon to 10 in the evening, soldiers will line up outside her room, waiting till they had their turn. Some will even hurt her physically just because they could not feel a sense of satisfaction.
Grabe, ang lala at sobrang bigat naman po. Nakakalungkot na at such a young age, Rosa was treated like a toy.
It's true. What more is that the other women were given a week to rest because of their monthly period. But si Rosa, due to her young age, hindi pa siya nagkakaroon ng period, kaya hindi siya binibigyan ng pahinga. They were allowed to take a bath every day. Pero as they shower, they remain to be still violated, having no doors or cover to at least give them privacy from prying of the eyes of the Imperial Army. Twice a week, they were allowed to go outside.
Yes, then noong August 1943, they were transferred to a rice mill on Henson Road, named after her father. There, she met Captain Tanaka.
Ay, wait Miss Vivas, sino naman po si Captain Tanaka?
Okay, so si Tanaka ay isang soldier na kasama sa naging rapist ni Rosa. Captain Tanaka recognized her and since then, he had somehow taken pity on Rosa. He calls her Bara, which is rose in Japanese. One time, he pricked her chin with a fountain pen that its mark cannot be removed anymore. Rosa had a malaria attack while being violated. Hindi naniwala yung mga sundalo na may sakit si Rosa. Kaya sinaktan nila si Rosa and then tinulungan naman siya ni Captain Tanaka. Pero kahit na kahit na kinaawaan na siya ni Captain Tanaka, nirape pa rin siya si Rosa ng paulit-ulit. Then pagkalipas ng ilang araw, inatake naman si Rosa ng malaria. Pero kasabay din nito ay nakunan din pala siya. Kaya pinagpahinga muna siya ng 1 linggo.
Sobra naman yan. At nagawa pang ulitin ni Captain Tanaka ang mga ginawa niya.
Tama yun. Isang gabi, dadalan sana ng tiyaan ni Rosa si Captain Tanaka at isang colonel. Ngunit narinig ito ng ang balak ng mga Hapon na sunugin ang baryo ng Pampang. Kung kaya't nung nagkaroon siya ng pagkakataon na mas schedule sa pagbabilad sa araw, nagbigay siya ng warning sa matandang nakita niya na nagmula sa kanyang baryo. Pumalpak ang plano ng colonel dahil sa naabisuhan ni Rosa, ang kanyang mga kabaryo. Pero dahil dito ay kinulong ng colonel si Rosa kasama ang ibang mga preso na miyembro ng Hook. Tanging si Rosa lamang ang ibang nakarinig, kung kaya ay sigurado ang colonel na siya ang nag-abiso nito. Dahil rito ay paulit-ulit siyang tinorture at isang beses na binigyan ng tubig ni Captain Tanaka ay ipinukpok pa nito ng malakas ng colonel at nawalan ito ng malay.
Grabe, no? Sobrang dami talaga ng pinagdaanan ni Rosa.
Nagsagawa ng atake ang mga Hook upang mapakawalan ang mga kasama nilang nakulong at dinala ng isang Hook si Rosa kahit walang malay. Ngunit sa bigat ni Rosa at hinahabol pa sila ng mga Hapon, kaya iniwan na lang siya sa gilid ng kalsada at doon siya natagpuan ng kanyang tita.
What if kamustahin naman natin kung anong nangyari kay Rosa after ng lahat ng iyon? Like kung nagka-loveless pa siya or what? Kasi sa totoo lang, napaka-traumatic na napagdaanan niya.
Tama, Lyka. Sa bagay, she was just in her teenage years noong panahon na yun. Marami pa ang pwedeng mangyari along her journey.
So ito na nga. Pampalubag loob lang. In 1945, if you can remember, this was the year kung saan natapos ang Japanese occupation. So for sure, Rosa underwent some healing processes din naman, di ba?
Oo nga po. Tama po ba?
Yes, tama kayo dyan. In the year 1945, the Japanese have finally surrendered to the Americans. Thus, their colonization ended. Kay Rosa naman, her life became better with the help of her mom. Together with her mom was a boy named Domingo, who runs errands like fetching laundry for his fellow soldiers.
Oo, ito na nga bang sinasabi ko eh. I think si Good Boy Domingo na ang ating male lead. Tama ba? Lyka?
Naku friends, duda ako sa good boy na yun. Kasi kadalasan sa male lead, problematic. Pero let's see.
So, in 1925, Domingo was born in Alaminos, Laguna. His father was one of the soldiers who died during an encounter with Japanese troops in 1942. Following his father's death, Domingo decided to join the Allied forces in 1944. And then in May 1945, their group set up a camp in Angeles. Domingo worked as waiter there and this was where he met Rosa for the first time. Afterwards, Domingo fell in love with Rosa but it was unrequited.
Although Rosa did not feel any love for Domingo, gusto niya pa rin magkaanak para sa when she grows old, may kasama siya pagtanda. Then dito na si Domingo, ni-reveal niya yung pagiging comfort woman niya. Sinabi niya kay Domingo lahat ng experiences niya, maliban dun sa sikreto niya.
Around 1945, she agreed to live with Domingo in Alaminos, Laguna. They only had a small civil wedding in their town hall as requested by Domingo's mother. A year later, 1946, Rosa left for Okinawa while her husband Domingo stayed and worked for the US Army in 12th Division.
When Domingo was finally discharged from the military, both Rosa and him moved to Pasay. There, he worked in the Department of Highways as a caminero.
O ano po ba yung caminero?
Eto friends, nag-search ako. Caminero is a Spanish word. It translates to road worker pala.
Oh, yun pala.
And on 1947, Rosa got pregnant with her first child. This was also the year when Rosa's father, Don Pepe, died. Due to her father's death, Rosa rushed to Angeles only to find out that he was already dead for almost a week. After learning this, Rosa went to her father's house and there she approached Doña Sarin, her father's wife, saying that she was Don Pepe's illegitimate child.
On August 13, 1947, Domingo and Rosa's first child was born named Rosalinda. 2 years later, September 2, 1949, Rosario was born, their second child. And after giving birth to their second daughter, their family moved to Santa Cruz, Laguna to find better job opportunities.
Oh, ito na ba ang happy ending na inaabangan natin?
Naku, hindi pa yan, Franz. Kailangan munang dumaan sa pagsubok ang kanilang relationship para exciting.
Anong klaseng pagsubok naman ba ang kailangan nilang pagdaanan?
Ito ang pagsubok na hinahanap mo, Franz. One night in 1950, a group of people went to their house and took Domingo. With a shocking event, Rosa and her children ran away and went to Domingo's mom. Months have passed, but there was still no sight or news about Domingo. And so, Rosa and her children decided to go back to Pasay to her mother.
In March 1951, Rosario, her second daughter, got sick because of blood poisoning. And because of poverty, Rosario's confinement became a challenge for them, but after a week, Rosario was finally healed with the help of Domingo's mother. After Rosario's treatment, Rosa left for Santa Rosario when suddenly she was threatened by two men to come with them, and in the mountains where they traveled to, she saw her husband Domingo from afar.
Ayan na ang sinasabi kong pagsubok, o diba? That can really find its way back to you.
Wala, love pa ba yun kung na-threaten nga si Rosa? Anyways, saan ba kasi galing si Domingo?
The group of people around Rosa pertained to Domingo as their commander. During her stay at some place where Domingo was, Rosa saw a small book filled with her husband's handwriting, and there she learned that a group of people who captured Domingo forced him to form an anti-government movement with them. And then Domingo later explained that he was the commander of HMB, better known as Hukbong Mapagpalaya ng Bayan, with the goal of redistributing lands to peasants.
But all Rosa could think about was the safety of Rosario, which was why one day, when no one was guarding her, she attempted to escape, but someone from the organization found her. Due to her attempt, Domingo got mad and sexually abused her just like how she was abused in her teenage years.
Grabe ka na, Domingo. I thought you were different.
Ang sakit naman. Parang imagine she mustered up the courage para masabi kay Domingo ang trauma na pinagdaanan niya. Tapos, siya rin palang mismo uulit sa mga nangyari kay Rosa. Grabe. Ang frustrating. Okay, continue po.
By the following day, Celia, Domingo's second wife, convinced Rosa to join their organization, but Rosa refused. And days passed, Rosa found out that she was pregnant again with their third child. But she did not tell her husband. She pleaded so many times if she could go back home, but every time that she asked, she would always be rejected.
Then one day, the army bombed their area and Domingo lost a lot of men. While they were running away, Domingo finally found out that Rosa was pregnant with his third child, but still refused to let her go. Until one day, when Celia and Domingo's men went out to buy medicine, Domingo told Rosa to go with them to escape. This was when Rosa found out that Rosario had died. Because of this, she despised Domingo so much, but she could not do anything.
Rosa went home via bus to Manila, and when she reached home, she saw Rosario still alive and breathing. Their lives went back to normal the day that she returned, and during midnight at Christmas, her third child was born and he was named Jesus.
A few days after giving birth to her son, Rosa heard from the radio that Domingo had died due to an encounter with the military in San Pablo, Laguna. Despite of what happened with them when they held her captive, she still mourned her husband's death because she still loved him. She visited Domingo's comrades in jail and went home knowing that all that she could do was to fight again for herself and for her children.
Given that this is a special episode dedicated to comfort women during the Japanese occupation, we want to share their stories in order to ensure that their voices are being heard and addressed on this platform.
Tama.
Hindi porket nakaraan na siya at sa nakaraan siya nangyari, hindi na natin yun pag-uusapan. Hanggang ngayon, marami pa rin naman ang hindi nabibigyan ng katarungan sa mga ginawa ng mga Hapones sa ating mga Pilipino. Kaya tayo ay may justice system para malaman ng bawat mamamayan na may katumbas na kabayaran ang kasalanan at kailangan magbayad ng mga kabayaran ang mga Hapones.
Tama ka dyan. Then, pwede niyong sabihin na, hala, ang kanta ng pasto? Yes, ang kanta ng past with a purpose. Nakita niyo ang story ni Rosa kung ano ang naging buhay niya with the trauma she had. Pero nagkaroon siya ng lakas ng loob na lumaban. Pumunta siya sa maraming conferences, interviews, and TV networks to tell her story at nakaabot pa siya sa iba't ibang bansa dahil dito. You can see her dedication to seeking justice in her journey not only for herself, pero sa mga kababaihan na rin na katulad niya na hindi makapagsalita. Ngunit sa huli, hindi rin sila nagtagumpay na nabigay sa kanilang katarungan at compensation na hinihiling nila.
Tama yan narinig niyo sa podcast. Huwag tayo magbulag-bulagan sa mga nangyayari. We need to take further action from this story. Sa podcast na to, hina-highlight namin ang batas ng Magna Carta of Women or Republic Act No. 9710 that human rights legislation aimed at eliminating discrimination against women by protecting, fulfilling, and advocating the rights of Filipino women, especially those in most marginalized communities.
Dapat napapanatili at napapatibay ang pagpapairal ng karapatan ng kababaihan at maproteksyonan ng kinabibilangan na estado. Dahil pinapairal ang mga ito, mas nakasanayan ng kultura natin ang victim blaming at shaming sa ating lipunan. Common na maririnig ninyo galing sa sarili niyong kababayan ay, bakit ka kasi sumama sa kanila? Ba't ka kasi uminom? And most commonly, ano kasi suot mo nun? Phrases na nag-e-echo sa atin na palaging may ibang connotation and prejudices, comments against women. In this culture, mas gina-justify natin yung mga sexual aggression against women. Hindi kasalanan ng mga babae ang nangyari. Kasalanan ng mga gumawa ng kamalian at estado na nagpapahintulot pa iralin ang kamalian na aksyon sa lipunan kahit na may batas na nagpaprotekta sa babaihan.
I certainly agree with you, Lyka. We should not tolerate sexual misconduct and should pursue retribution for all women out there. In line with our episode, we celebrate National Women's Month that highlights the theme Agenda ng Kababaihan tungo sa kaunlaran ay isang pandaigdigang araw na ipinagdiriwang ang makasaysayang, kultural at politikal na mga tagumpay ng kababaihan. Pinapahalagaan ang pagsisikap ng bawat kababaihan sa lipunan at sumusuporta rin sa pagkilos laban sa hindi pagkapantay-pantay ng kasarian sa buong mundo. Until now, there are still comfort women struggling to accept their past trauma. Trauma that haunts them to this day when they recall their unpleasant experiences during the Japanese occupation.
I agree with you, friends. These women are still longing for the comfort and acceptance they need to fully recover. Oo nga pala, to our new listeners out there, hindi lang historians ang makakausap natin but also experts for us to have an in-depth understanding about the topic.
Ayan, tama Lyka. So for this episode, we invited two psychologists who can help us to understand how traumas can affect one's well-being. Not just that, but also tips on how to cope well with these traumas.
That's right, Franz. So, without further ado, may we present to you our guest specialists, two psychologists. Let us welcome Ms. Cassandra Cayanan and Ms. Julianne Lovino.
Yay! Hello po! Good day po sa inyo. And we welcome you both to our podcast.
Thank you for having us.
How are you guys today?
Hi, Lyka, friends, and to everyone listening to the podcast. I'm very fine today, and hopefully I can give a proper insight and share my knowledge to all of you guys.
I am doing very well. I am incredibly happy to be part of this episode, and I am hoping na I can be a good help to elaborate the topic well.
That is very good to hear naman po. So ayun, Doc. This trauma had a profound effect on them, similar to Rosa's story. What can be done po ba as a coping mechanism for this?
Well, first, to the comfort women who are listening to this podcast, I would like to remind you what they did to you does not define who you are, okay? The process of getting better has no time, wala siyang time limit. So you can take as much as time as you need to consider, accept, and validate. Validate whatever you are feeling.
Magsimula muna tayo sa psychological impact ng trauma sa bawat nakaranas ng sexual abuse. Each person has suffered from trauma will have a distinct reaction to their traumatic experience. It can result in people suffering from depression, anxiousness, despair, sheer terror, intrusive memories, and paranoia. It is critical to recognize that these symptoms are a normal response to trauma. These symptoms do not reflect your reality. Although overcoming sexual abuse is challenging, there are ways to recover from your trauma while also uplifting yourself and your story.
And so we will give you 3 healthy steps on coping up with your trauma. The first step is to be open with those who can be trusted with your experience. Una sa lahat, talk to the people you trust. A person who understands, who supports, and empathizes with you. It is very critical to your well-being, which can stand as your support system. To heal, one must face their demons head-on, and hiding only heightens the sense of shame that one already feels. So even though it's frightening to let yourself be vulnerable, doing so will actually set you free.
Wow, thank you very much for that, Doc Cayanan. I agree with you po. Palagi natin naririnig yung phrases na the truth will set you free. Well, this may seem cliché in other circumstances. We highly suggest it in this case since it alleviates the heaviness of what you have gone through. So, if you are unable to contact a trusted friend or family member, seek assistance from a therapist or support group.
For the second step, slowly accept and validate the emotions you are experiencing. You will experience feelings of guilt, shame, and despair throughout the process as well as other emotional responses. While you may believe you could have done more to prevent the incident from occurring, I want to assure you that you are not responsible for what happened. Allow time for processing, be patient with yourself, and gradually validate your feelings until you regain your balance.
It takes time talaga to heal all the wounds and scars throughout the years, Dr. Vino. Suporta ako dyan sa part of validation sa emotions. Madalas dinedeny and ini-invalidate kasi natin yung struggles at nararamdaman natin to the point na minamasama na natin kahit na it is valid.
Sa totoo lang, Lyka, kaya I highlighted in the steps yung acceptance and validation.
I have a question, Dr. Vino. How about the flashbacks na mararanasan nila? And what course of action might be taken in response?
Good question, Lyka. They should try to anticipate and prepare for the triggers. Diba sabi nga nila, kapag alam mo paano gagawin mo, hindi ka mangangarag kung ano ang gagawin mo. So, I highly suggest pinpoint the triggers. Take note of it and steps na makakapagpakalma sa'yo when it happens. If ever you feel the identified symptoms kicking in you, try to practice deep breathing.
Ayan. And syempre, for the last step, you have to start nurturing yourself. And yung healing process ng trauma, hindi siya nangyayari overnight. So, long-term ang effect sa'yo nung naging trauma, as much as gusto nating gumaling immediately, long-term rin ang healing process. We should take into account na it is a continuous journey throughout the years. I cannot say na mawawala agad yung trauma mo within the years of your development. I cannot say na mawawala yung trauma mo within the years of your development, but I can say na ma-overcome at makakontrol mo yung emotions mo towards it. So, alam mo na how to reduce and cope with it. So, magpatuloy ka na lang sa ginagawa mong routine of your development and self-care. Di siya nakakaaksaya ng panahon kapag you do it consistently, kasi in the long run, mas madali na yun for you.
We all have to bear in mind na iba't iba ang healing process natin. You should always choose the right routine na makakatulong talaga sa'yo. Nakasalalay sa'yo ang makahanap ng tamang coping mechanism na talaga mag-work for you.
We appreciate Doc Lovino and Doc Cayanan for the 3 steps coping mechanisms for sexual trauma. It will instill a sense of hope in the comfort women's minds that they will recover. If you're having difficulty dealing with this on your own, you can contact them directly for sessions to assist you. Now, returning to the story, we continue to hope for the Japanese government's acknowledgement of the Japanese government's atrocities committed during its occupation of the Philippines. Apart from that, maybe they may be able to compensate all vulnerable women who have lived and be given justice alongside other women whose voices have been silent.
Lagi niyong tatandaan na hindi kayo nag-iisa. Patuloy lang ang laban para sa hustisya ng kababaihan noong nakaraan.
With that, thank you very much to our historians and psychologists for their very insightful and very informing topic. So with that, thank you po ulit and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.